Brank, a mechanic known more for his knack with alien tech than for his modest starship repair shop, had seen plenty of strange wrecks in his time. But the craft drifting in the asteroid belt of Grouse was something else entirely. Its sleek, organic design shimmered faintly, as though alive even in its dereliction. The distress beacon had been active for decades, its signal barely detectable through the static of space. Dex's repair pod clamped onto the ship's hull. His breathing steadied as he activated his repair plasma cutter. "All right, let's see what's inside you," he muttered, slicing through a warped hatch. The ship groaned like a wounded beast as the seal gave way, revealing a dark interior. Inside, Dex found a damaged core, its circuits sparking faintly. As he worked, rerouting power and patching coolant lines, the ship's systems flickered to life. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a sound that made Dex freeze. A low growl. Turning, Dex scanned the shadows with his wrist torch. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing. The growl came again, closer this time. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. His torch landed on a cryochamber, its glass fractured but intact. Inside was something enormous, with fur like liquid night and claws that could rend steel. Its eyes were closed, its chest rising and falling faintly. Dex's breath caught. This wasn't just an alien passenger. It was something dangerous. "What in the stars are you?" he whispered, his gaze fixed on the massive creature. The answer would come sooner than he expected. Dex's repairs inadvertently triggered a surge of power. Alarms blared as the cryochamber hissed and began to thaw. "Oh no, no, Dex muttered, scrambling to shut it down. But it was too late. The glass slid open with a burst of vapor, and the creature inside stirred. It rose slowly, towering over Dex. Its fur shimmered with an iridescent glow, and its eyes, now open, burned like twin suns. The Zydian wolf, a deadly predator, snarled, baring teeth sharper than plasma blades. Dex backed up, his hands raised. "Easy there, big guy," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I just fixed your ship. No need to eat me." The wolf's growl deepened, but it didn't attack. Instead, it sniffed the air, its gaze narrowing as it studied him. Dex could feel its intelligence, its calculating nature. This wasn't a mindless beast. It was deciding what to do with him. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Dex slowly reached into his tool belt and pulled out a ration bar. "Hungry?" he offered, unwrapping it with trembling hands. The wolf sniffed again. Then, to Dex's amazement, it stepped forward. Its massive jaws closed around the bar, its glowing eyes never leaving him. It chewed thoughtfully, then huffed, almost as if in approval. "Well," Dex said, exhaling the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I guess we're friends now." The ship shuddered as more systems came online, and Dex realized they weren't alone. Sensors pinged. Ships were approaching fast. The galaxy had noticed the Zydian wolf was awake, and they weren't coming to welcome it back. The ship's sensors blared in warning as Dex scrambled to the cockpit. Through the viewport, he saw them, two sleek vessels bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council. Their designs were unmistakable. Enforcer-class ships armed with plasma cannons and tractor beams. "Of course," Dex muttered. "Can't let a guy have a peaceful moment." The wolf, now fully awake, growled low and deep, its glowing eyes locked onto the approaching ships, as though it understood the threat. Dex glanced at it, unsure whether to feel comforted or terrified. "Any chance you know how to pilot a ship?" he asked dryly. The wolf's growl shifted, almost a snort, and it turned toward the navigation console. Dex followed its gaze and realized the wolf wasn't just looking, it was motioning. "You want me to fire up the engine?" Dex asked. The wolf barked sharply, a sound that echoed with authority. Dex didn't argue. He reconnected the final circuits, and the ship's systems roared to life. The control panels lit up, displaying alien symbols Dex couldn't fully decipher. But one thing was clear, the ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a weapon. The enforcer ships opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through space. Dex yanked the controls, narrowly dodging the first volley. The wolf growled again, stepping forward and nudging a glowing lever with its snout. "You're serious?" Dex asked. "You want me to use this?" The wolf barked again, more urgently this time. Dex pulled the lever, and the ship responded with a hum that built into a deafening crescendo. Energy pulsed through its hull, and a blinding beam of light erupted from its forward cannons, slicing through one of the enforcer ships in an instant. Dex stared, wide-eyed. "Okay. Definitely not your average transport." The second Enforcer ship wheeled around for another attack. The Enforcer ship broke off, retreating toward the edge of the asteroid field. Dex exhaled, his hands trembling as he steadied the controls. The wolf turned to him, its glowing eyes calm but commanding. "Guess you're not just a passenger," Dex said, meeting its gaze. "Looks like we're in this together." The brief respite was shattered by a new alarm. More ships were incoming. This time, a full squadron. The Council wasn't taking chances. Dex checked the sensors and saw a dozen Enforcer-class ships and a massive dreadnought on approach. "Great," Dex muttered. "They brought the whole neighborhood." The wolf growled, stepping beside him. It nudged a display on the console, bringing up a map of the asteroid field. Dex frowned, trying to decipher the symbols. "You want me to go there?" he asked, pointing to a dense cluster of rocks, the escape. The wolf barked in affirmation, its glowing eyes fierce with determination. Dex gripped the controls and pushed the engines to full throttle. The ship roared forward, weaving through the asteroid field with surprising agility. Behind them, the Enforcer ships pursued, their plasma bolts scattering harmlessly against the larger asteroids. The wolf, seemingly understanding the ship's systems better than Dex, pressed its paw against another panel. The ship emitted a pulse of energy, sending smaller asteroids hurtling toward the pursuing ships. Two Enforcers collided with the debris, exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Dex laughed despite himself. "You're a natural, buddy." But the dreadnought was undeterred. It loomed closer, its massive cannons charging. Dex's sensors warned of an incoming energy blast, powerful enough to vaporize them. The wolf snarled, its fur bristling as it pawed at another lever. "I hope you know what you're doing," Dex said, pulling the lever. The ship's engines surged, and suddenly, they weren't in the asteroid field anymore. They were in open space, far from their pursuers. Dex stared at the navigation display, realizing they had just executed a near-instantaneous jump. "Okay," he said, turning to the wolf. "You've got some explaining to do." The wolf simply sat down, its fiery eyes locked on Dex's. For the first time, Dex felt the weight of what he'd stumbled into. This wasn't just a lost creature or a random ship, it was something far more significant. And whatever it was, the galaxy wasn't going to let them go easily. Dex leaned back in the pilot's chair, his hands still trembling from the near escape. The wolf sat beside him, its fiery eyes unblinking, watching him intently. The silence between them felt heavy, charged with unspoken understanding. Finally, Dex broke it. "All right, Shadow," he said, giving the wolf the name that had stuck in his mind. "You clearly know more about this ship than I do. What are you exactly?" Shadow let out a low, rumbling growl, then nudged a control panel with its nose. The holographic display flickered, showing alien symbols that Dex didn't recognize. But as Shadow continued pawing at the console, the symbols rearranged themselves into something Dex could read, a series of star maps and logs. Dex's eyes widened as he scanned the information. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was an ancient artifact, a relic from the long-lost Zydian Empire. And Shadow wasn't just any alien wolf. It was the last of the Zydian Sentinels, a bioengineered guardian created to protect the Empire's most valuable assets. "This ship," Dex murmured, piecing it together. "It's a weapon, isn't it? And you're its pilot." Shadow barked once, a sharp, affirming sound. Dex ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "No wonder the Council's after you. You're not just dangerous, you're a symbol of everything they fear." Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared again. The new fleet of Council ships had tracked their jump. Dex cursed, pulling up the navigation display. "They don't quit, do they?" Shadow growled, its fur bristling as it paced toward the ship's weapon controls. Dex followed its lead, realizing there was no choice but to fight. The Council fleet wasted no time, surrounding them with precision. The dreadnought that had pursued them earlier was back, its massive cannons charging for another strike. Dex gripped the controls, but Shadow intervened, pawing at a sequence of commands that activated the ship's defensive systems. A barrier of shimmering energy enveloped the ship, deflecting the first volley of plasma. Blasts rocked the ship, but Dex couldn't help being impressed. "Okay, so you're not just a pretty face," he said. Shadow growled in what Dex could only interpret as agreement. But the dreadnought wasn't giving up. It unleashed a barrage of smaller drones, each armed with high-yield explosives. Dex maneuvered the ships skillfully, dodging the drones, but there were too many. Shadow, we need more firepower, Dex shouted. The wolf pressed another panel, and the ship's weapons hummed to life. Energy cannons and missile bays activated, targeting the drones with surgical precision. Explosions lit up the void as the ship tore through the swarm. However, the dreadnought unleashed its trump card, a gravity well projector. The ship lurched as it was caught in the well's pull, unable to escape. Dex fought the controls, but it was no use. "This is bad," he muttered. Shadow growled, then leapt to the navigation console. With a swipe of its paw, it activated a sequence Dex hadn't seen before. The ship's core pulsed with light, and a surge of energy rippled through the hull. "What are you doing?" Dex asked, his voice tinged with both awe and panic. Shadow turned to him, its fiery eyes unwavering. The wolf let out a low, determined growl, and suddenly, the ship unleashed a massive shockwave. The gravity well collapsed, and the dreadnought was thrown off course. Dex stared at the display, his heart pounding. "You saved us. Again." The battle had left the ship battered but intact. Dex set a course for the nearest uninhabited system to regroup. As the ship entered orbit around a small, desolate moon, Dex turned to Shadow. "We need to talk about what just happened." Shadow didn't respond, but its gaze was unflinching. Dex sighed, sitting down on the floor beside the wolf. "Look, I don't know how I got caught up in this, but it's clear you're not just a passenger. You're the reason the Council's chasing us, and I need to know why." Shadow moved to the holographic console and activated another sequence. This time, the display showed a recording, a message from the Zydian Empire, preserved for centuries. A regal alien figure appeared, speaking in a language Dex couldn't understand. Subtitles translated the words, "To the one who finds this vessel, know that you carry the legacy of the Zydian people. This ship, the Soulstride, is our last hope, entrusted to our sentinel, Fenry. Protect it, for within lies the key to balance or destruction." Dex swallowed hard. Balance or destruction? That's vague. The message continued, detailing how the Council had risen to power after the fall of the Zydian Empire, using fear and control to dominate the galaxy. The Soulstride was the only weapon capable of challenging their reign. Dex looked at Shadow. "So you're not just running from them, you're the only thing that can stop them." Shadow barked once, sharp and clear. Dex laughed humorlessly, running a hand through his hair. "Well, guess that makes me your mechanic/pilot, huh?" Shadow tilted its head as if in agreement. Before Dex could process it further, the ship's sensors pinged. Another Council fleet was closing in. This time, they weren't alone. Holodrones broadcasting the encounter ensured the entire galaxy was watching. Dex sighed, standing up and gripping the controls. "All right, Shadow, let's show them what this ship and you can really do." The Council's fleet bore down on the desolate moon where Dex and Shadow had taken refuge. Their massive warships cast long shadows across the barren surface, a menacing display of power meant to intimidate. But Dex and Shadow were far beyond fear. Inside the Soulstride, Dex scanned the incoming ships on the holographic display. "That's a lot of firepower," he muttered. "They've got 3 dreadnoughts, dozens of frigates, and something bigger." The display highlighted a colossal vessel unlike any Dex had ever seen, a fortress ship bristling with weaponry. Its energy signature pulsed with an unnatural glow. Shadow growled, its fur bristling as it stepped closer to the console. "This is a trap," Dex said, narrowing his eyes. "They're not just here to capture us. No, they wanted to make a statement." A crackling broadcast interrupted the tension. Counselor Gree's golden-scaled face appeared on the holo screen, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Mechanic," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've become a nuisance, but it ends here. Surrender the ship and the beast, and we might show mercy." Dex smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I've got a counteroffer. How about you leave, and I don't turn your fleet into scrap metal?" Gree's expression darkened. "You overestimate your chances, human. Prepare to be obliterated." The broadcast ended, and the Council's ships began their advance. Plasma bolts lit up the void as the fleet surrounded the Soulstride. Shadow growled low, its fiery eyes narrowing as it nudged Dex's arm, guiding him toward a set of unfamiliar controls. "You want me to use this?" Dex asked. Shadow barked sharply, a command, not a suggestion. Dex activated the controls, and the Soulstride responded with a hum that built into a deafening roar. Panels shifted, and the ship's hull glowed with energy. Hidden weapons systems emerged, pulsing with power. "All right, Shad, Dex said, gripping the controls. Let's show them what this ship can do. The Soul Stride launched into action, weaving through the Council's fleet with an agility that defied its size. Shadow seemed to anticipate every move, growling commands that Dex followed instinctively. Together, they were a seamless team. Energy cannons fired, cutting through frigates with surgical precision. A plasma beam sliced across the battlefield, disabling one of the dreadnoughts in a single shot. The fortress ship retaliated, its massive cannons unleashing a barrage of firepower. Dex maneuvered the Soul Stride skillfully, dodging the blasts while returning fire. Inside the ship, alarms blared as enemy drones swarmed, attempting to breach the hull. Shadow leapt into action, activating the ship's internal defenses. Automated turrets sprang to life, tearing through the intruders. Dex marveled at the coordination, realizing Shadow wasn't just a passenger. It was the heart of the ship, its true pilot. Despite their prowess, the Council's numbers were overwhelming. The fortress ship loomed closer, its energy weapon charging for a devastating strike. Dex's fingers danced over the controls as he pushed the Soul Stride to its limits. Shadow growled, its intense gaze locked on the holographic display. The fortress ship's energy weapon was nearly ready to fire, and the Soul Stride's shields were weakening. "This isn't looking good, Shadow," Dex said, sweat beading on his forehead. "We need something big, like save the day big." Shadow stepped to a glowing panel, pressing its paw against a sequence of symbols. The ship responded with a deep hum, and a hidden compartment in the console slid open, revealing a control module unlike anything Dex had ever seen. The module pulsed with light, its intricate design a testament to Zydian engineering. "What's this?" Dex asked, eyes narrowing. Shadow growled softly, its gaze unwavering. It was a silent message. "Trust me." Dex hesitated only a moment before activating the module. The ship's core pulsed brighter, and the entire vessel seemed to shift. The Soul Stride surged with power, its systems syncing perfectly with Shadow's commands. Energy erupted from the ship in a massive shockwave, disabling the enemy fleet's weapons and shields. The fortress ship staggered, its hull glowing with the force of the blast. Dex seized the opportunity, targeting the fortress's main cannon. The Soul Stride's plasma beams cut through its armor, igniting a chain reaction. The fortress ship began to implode, its energy weapon consuming itself in a fiery cascade. The remaining Council ships scrambled to retreat, their formation shattered. As the battlefield quieted, Dex leaned back in his chair, breathing heavily. "We did it," he said, looking at Shadow. The wolf, though battered, stood tall, its fiery eyes blazing with triumph. A transmission came through from the rebel fleet, which had been watching from a safe distance. Captain Rail's voice crackled over the comms. "Dex, that was incredible. You just took down the Council's flagship." Dex chuckled weakly. "Yeah, with a lot of help from my co-pilot." Shadow let out a low, approving growl. Dex patted its head, a gesture of camaraderie. "All right, big guy." "Nah," he said. "Let's head home and figure out our next move. Something tells me this is far from over." Together, they set a course for the rebel stronghold, leaving behind a field of wreckage. And a galaxy forever changed. The destruction of the fortress ship sent shockwaves through the galaxy. News of Dex and Shadow's victory spread rapidly, inspiring resistance movements and emboldening those who had long suffered under the Galactic Council's reign. But while the galaxy celebrated, the Council plotted their revenge, the Omega Array. In the shadowy halls of the Council chamber, Councillor Gree stood before a holographic display of the Soul Stride, his golden-scaled face twisted in fury as he addressed the assembled councillors. "This human mechanic and his beast have humiliated us for the last time. They've turned our greatest weapon into a symbol of rebellion." Councillor Myra, glowing faintly in her corner of the chamber, Gaft spoke calmly. "Perhaps it's not the weapon that's the problem, Grex. It's the message. The galaxy is no longer afraid." Grex snarled, his claws raking the air. "Then, we will remind them why they should be." The Council approved a desperate measure, deploying the Omega Array, a planet-killing superweapon hidden deep within Council space. Its target, the rebel stronghold where Dex and Shadow had sought refuge. The Council aimed not only to destroy their enemies, but to make an example of them. The rebel stronghold. On the rebel planet, Dex worked tirelessly with the resistance to fortify their defenses. Shadow, always at his side, patrolled the perimeter, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon. The bond between them had grown stronger with every battle, a silent partnership that inspired awe among the rebels. Captain Rail approached Dex in the makeshift command center. "We've picked up an energy signature heading this way," Rail said grimly. "It's massive, bigger than anything we've faced." Dex glanced at Shadow, who growled low. "Let me guess," Dex said. "Council superweapon?" Rail nodded. "The Omega Array. If it fires, this planet is done." Dex ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Then we take it out. Shadow and I can get aboard and disable it." "That's suicide," Rail said. "You've done enough, Dex. Let us handle this." Dex shook his head. "This isn't just about us anymore. Shadow and I are the only ones who can do this. Trust me." Reluctantly, Rail agreed. The rebels prepared a diversionary fleet to distract the Council's defenses, while Dex and Shadow infiltrated the Omega Array. The stakes had never been higher. The infiltration. The Omega Array loomed like a metal leviathan against the backdrop of space, its sleek design and glowing core radiating an ominous power. As the rebel fleet engaged the Council's forces, plasma bolts lit up the void in a chaotic dance of destruction. In a stolen Council transport, Dex and Shadow approached the superweapon under the cover of battle. The ship docked with the array's hull, and the pair entered through a maintenance hatch. The corridors inside were eerily silent, their metallic walls pulsing with the weapon's energy. Shadow led the way, its growls guiding Dex through the labyrinthine structure. They encountered resistance, Council enforcers armed with advanced weaponry, but Shadow tore through them with unmatched ferocity, its claws and speed making quick work of the guards. They reached the core chamber, a massive spherical room glowing with unstable energy. The core itself floated at the center, tethered by streams of light. Dex's eyes widened as he scanned the controls. "This thing is more complicated than anything I've ever seen," he muttered. Shadow growled, nudging Dex toward a panel. Dex trusted its instincts, activating the console and beginning the shutdown sequence. Alarms blared as the core's energy levels spiked. "Great," Dex muttered. "Looks like they've got a failsafe." Counselor Gree's voice echoed through the chamber. "You're too late, mechanic. The Omega Array will fire, and your precious rebellion will be ash." Dex turned to see Grex entering the chamber, clad in a reinforced exosuit bristling with weapons. Shadow growled, stepping between Dex and the counselor. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Dex said, gripping his plasma blade. Grex sneered. "And you don't know when you've lost." The final battle. The fight was ferocious. Gree's exosuit unleashed waves of plasma and energy blasts, but Shadow countered with raw power and precision. Dex worked frantically at the console, bypassing the failsafe while dodging debris from the escalating battle. Shadow leapt at Grex, its claws tearing through the exosuit's armor. The counselor roared, his attacks growing more desperate. "Keep him busy, Shadow," Dex shouted. "I'm almost there." The core's energy levels reached critical just as Dex completed the shutdown. The chamber shuddered as the core began to destabilize. "We've got to go," Dex shouted. Shadow delivered a final blow, sending Grex crashing into the core. The counselor screamed as the energy consumed him, triggering a chain reaction. Dex and Shadow sprinted through the collapsing corridors, their escape punctuated by explosions. They reached their ship and launched just as the Omega Array erupted in a brilliant explosion. The shockwave obliterated the remaining Council fleet, leaving the rebels victorious. A new dawn. Back on the rebel planet, Dex and Shadow were hailed as heroes. The destruction of the Omega Array marked the beginning of the Council's collapse. Systems across the galaxy rose in rebellion, inspired by the mechanic and his unstoppable wolf. As Dex stood on a hill overlooking the rebel base, Shadow sat beside him, its glowing eyes scanning the stars. "We did it," Dex said, resting a hand on the wolf's head. But something told him their work wasn't done. Shadow growled softly, its gaze unwavering. Together, they had become more than a team. They were a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for a galaxy ready to reclaim its freedom.